The U.S. stock market continuing this volatile week. The S&P 500 has basically had $4 trillion with a T, $4 trillion in value wiped out since the peak in the last month. It's down about 9 to 10% in that month period, with a lot of problems over the past few days. We are witnessing a brewing financial revolt over President Trump's tariffs, some of his economic leadership, and recently his frankly odd refusal to even try to encourage the markets. Donald Trump basically passed on the opportunity to quiet concerns over a possible, quote, recession to start the week. Those markets now down, as you see, 8% or so in the last month, wiping out all initial gains from the period that began with Trump's inauguration in January. That was when Wall Street, which typically leans to the right, was bullish on a new president, even as he literally walked the floor of the trading floor there. It was a new president who vowed lower taxes and less regulation and smaller government, while also making deals with the billionaires and the tech gurus who are almost sort of worshipped on Wall Street. The point is, remember, not so long ago that it was a very warm start for the president. Doing almost nothing might have continued those warm feelings. But that's all now soured in response to President Trump's frankly unusual, chaotic first 7 weeks in office. The markets today you're looking at are down about another point or so, which is translated to about $350 billion lost in the S&P alone, on top of what I showed you, the broader slide over the tariff chaos and a general concern over the new president and the United States policies and where we're headed. So a president who began tight with Wall Street has now committed what really looks like a massive fumble. It's the kind of error that bankers see as avoidable, as Donald Trump's fault. Not what also can happen with the markets and the economy, which is sometimes a macroeconomic surprise or a pandemic. This is different. I'll show you what one financial expert calls it. The slumps now are very much a, quote, man-made situation. Now, I have more on the details of the Wall Street reaction, and I'm going to show you them because Trump is basically revealing a kind of shaky hand. He had vowed more tariffs on Canada, which was breaking with pleas and even sirens he was hearing from investors, from CEOs, from many Republicans, some of this in public, some of it reportedly in private, as well as what economists have said about the whole trade war. And that's just over the past 24 hours or so. But Trump had resisted that going into today, promising more tariffs. Then late today, the president reversed course and pulled back on what were the new planned tariffs after Canada eased off some of its planned retaliation. Many are seeing what is now the market Trump slump as the risk of a looming Trump session. Now, Trump made some of his first remarks since the weekend. He has been laying low more so than usual. And the results here are clear and stark. The risk of a recession, according to the people who live and basically their careers live and die by these calls, who live and breathe Wall Street data, well, they say the recession risk is higher because of extreme U.S. policies. That's how J.P. Morgan Chase economists put it. That's a reference to Trump's extreme policies. And they say this recession risk has grown now, just over the past few weeks, partly because of Trump, and it is as high as 40%. You don't need to be a math whiz to know 40% is edging close to something that is as likely to happen as not, and higher than when Trump took over. Others peg this as a problem that is real but lower risk, say 20% up from 15%, according to the powerhouse bank Goldman Sachs. Others banking in this region and all these issues say, look, the quote I mentioned earlier, it's very much a man-made situation. That's from the top investment officer at Key Private Bank. Now, at this point, you could ask, is there going to be a Trump recession? Now, if I just say those words, they could sound like the framing of a Democratic attack ad eyeing the next election. It could sound like something a Trump critic would say. So I'm saying it to you first as a question. People who are cynical, and we know plenty of folks on the right who are very cynical about what they see as the mainstream press, journalists, might say, oh, there they go, asking about a Trump recession so early on, yada, yada, yada. Well, what I asked you was a quote, and I'll show you the source. Will there be a Trump recession is the question on Wall Street, and it is posed by Fox News' sister outlet, Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal. If you don't like the question, shoot the messenger. But if the messenger is your best friend, maybe you have to ask why they're so worried that you're tanking the economy. Now, we've reported since the market jitters began, this is a reality check. It is a product of economic indicators, of the collective hive mind of investors and Wall Street, and also what people are feeling in the country. It can't easily be spun by twisting an algorithm on X or Facebook, even if the MAGA billionaires tried. Now, here's the headlines. New York Times. Stocks plunge as recession talk gets louder. Wall Street fears Trump will wreck the soft landing, from the news section of Wall Street Journal. Wall Street stocks tumble as investors fret over U.S. economic slowdown, from the International Financial Times. Or Bloomberg, classic financial outlet, not political in any way, quote, markets rocked as Wall Street frets over Trump's economic impact. These are all data-driven facts and evidence. And everybody knows that Donald Trump has worked throughout his whole career, and certainly his time in television and PR and branding. He has worked outside the margins of reality. When he lost his biggest loss of his life, the presidential election, he launched a whole effort that turned into a movement, that turned into a violent insurrection based on what? On a big lie. And he had millions of people actually being confused or even believing the lie, even though he, of course, lost the 2020 election. Those efforts are much harder against an economic reality check like this. And so Trump is actually changing his tune, dealing with his playbook where he tries to sell the dream, spin the results, never acknowledge a loss, as I mentioned. But this is also getting to Trump. I mentioned how he's been staying out of the cameras more than usual. And when he has spoke on this, gone are the rosy proclamations and vows about how great things are going to be, and they've been replaced by a different Trump, a kind of grim football coach Trump. Hey, we're going to ride this out. We'll show you the comparison.
What I have to do is build a strong country. You can't really watch the stock market. Much higher stock markets. I think the stock market's going to be great. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. We will bring prices down.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition. We're going to win like never before. In many ways, the economy is going to be strong.
The economy is not strong. The economy is weak, weakened by trillions of losses, depending on how back far you count. But Trump vows of winning and winning and winning are gone, partly because as a PR type, he understands that while you can lie to people about a lot of things, or as Bob Marley said, you can fool some of the people some of the time. You can't fool all the people all the time, and definitely not when they're watching the money drain out of their accounts and they're watching their employers say, if we get a Trump recession, quoting the Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, a lot of other things are going to get worse. This Trump slump is also hitting those very billionaires that I mentioned Trump promised would benefit so handily from his leadership. The tech moguls from the inauguration, they were all smiles, most of them, and they certainly thought they had figured out a way to make more money, which, remember, is what they're best at. These are the people who accumulate wealth. That's why they're the wealthiest. This was partly, if not largely, a wealth play. How's that working out for Elon Musk? He's down $148 billion with Tesla absolutely tanking. Jeff Bezos, who's eaten so many of his own words and upended how he runs the Washington Post and changed his whole identity as a strong disruptor into someone who's more of a MAGA deal maker. Well, right now, this whole thing has cost him $29 billion. Zuckerberg, $5 billion down. Trump can see how his policies are linked to their losses. And he just jumped into an unusual photo op with Elon Musk at the White House, literally touting a Cybertruck you see there and Tesla vehicles. This is the closest thing you can get to a taxpayer-funded ad, right? Your time and money here is being directed towards helping Trump's billionaire friend. They talked about avoiding conflicts. You're looking at a very blatant conflict of interest as Tesla tanks. Trump was asked about the economy there.
And what's your message to Americans right now, sir, who are worried about the stock market? What's your message to them as they watch it?
That's very interesting. The Cybertruck is with. Have you been?
Let's go see the Cybertruck.
Sometimes the owns write themselves. That is what it looks like when you are playing yourself. You have no answer on how you're doing on the economy, or all the people I just showed you from the Wall Street Journal to Goldman Sachs saying the tariff confusion and the shaky leadership is driving a market slump. So when you're asked about it at a public appearance you volunteered for, what about everybody else, Mr. President? What about everybody else's situation, jobs, retirement accounts? You can't even summon the words. You just say, let's go look at my buddy's Cybertruck. I'm really worried about his billions, which is why a lot of this has become a bit of a dour, Baroque Trump-era punchline.
In the first Trump term, it took a disease to destroy the economy. This time, he is the disease.
It's not great when the summary of your first 2 months in office is stocks down, measles up. You know, that's bad. That's not good.
How's it going? Are you better off than you were 7 weeks ago? How do we get through the rest of this together with facts rather than spin and Cybertrucks?
There's some news breaking this hour we want to tell you about. Department of Education employees have been told today to vacate the building for security reasons starting at 6 p.m. this evening. That's according to a memo sent to all employees. The memo did not state what the security reason was that required employees to vacate at 6 p.m. today. The employees were told to take their laptops home with them. According to the memo, the building will reopen on Thursday. It comes as the Department of Education is already reckoning with large-scale cuts from Elon Musk. Donald Trump has also threatened to shutter the agency entirely. Let's bring in my friend and colleague, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, what do you know?
There's a lot to track agency to agency, department to department right now, Nicole. It's frankly kind of difficult here, but I know at this point in time that there have been workforce reductions planned across departments and agencies beyond just the probationary employees, folks that are working in the federal government for a year or two. We're talking about potentially 20, 30, 40% reductions that were planned across the board. And we saw from Health and Human Services Department this weekend, email go out to all HHS employees, the 80,000 employees, essentially offering them another buyout opportunity, a $25,000 stipend to leave their jobs. We talked to many federal workers who regretted not taking the first round of buyout offers because those probationary employees, for example, were fired just days later with no severance. So essentially these off-ramps have been presented again, but have been told that federal government workers should expect major workforce reduction. And of course, it's not standard operating procedure for department employees to be told to not come into the office here. We do not know at this time if there is a plan for a mass firing at the Department of Education, yet at the same time, they have given plenty of indications from the President of the United States to the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon herself, that workers should be prepared for the dismantling of the department. So I think this is notable heading into the night.
So what is the security concern about? Is it misdirection? Or, I mean, I worked in the White House after September 11th, and a security concern was usually imminent, not something noticed 24 hours prior.
Right, and it was about a week ago, actually, there were also questions about the Department of Housing and Urban Development. There were metal detectors that were having all employees go through, and there were lines about 3 blocks long for employees just to get into the workplace. Last week, the exact security concerns were never articulated or stated by the department. And from the Department of Education at this point in time, Nicole, we don't have answers either. And so it is quite something that these sort of decisions are being made. But we have a very few specifics on exactly why the decisions are being executed the way that they are.
Let me also ask you something from my vantage point as a former White House employee about shredding and destroying documents. This was not only unethical, but I think illegal. But NBC News is reporting this. USAID staff is being told to shred and burn all their classified documents. Quote, the U.S. Agency for International Development is instructing its staff in Washington to shred and burn documents, according to an email obtained by NBC News. The document destruction was set to take place Tuesday, according to an email from Erica Carr, the agency's acting executive secretary. Quote, shred as many documents first and reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break, Carr wrote. I worked in government for almost a decade. I've never heard of so much shredding being required that you would know ahead of time that, quote, the shredder would become unavailable or need a break. What is that about?
Right. I actually this morning got a message from somebody who left USAID earlier this year and passed along this email to me. And my response is naturally, is this standard operating procedure? And this individual said no, that they had never heard about burning or shredding of federal records at USAID. But then again, this individual told me they've never heard of the entire agency being gutted and their headquarters at the Ronald Reagan building being shut down. When are documents, burned by the State Department or USAID? Typically at an embassy when it is about to be overtaken, Marines have the authorization as a means of ensuring that classified records and personnel data do not get in the hands of individuals who are seen as threats. They do go and burn documents, but that's not what this situation is here. And I was talking to a national security records lawyer here who has already sent to the National Archives a demand to have the records stop from being destroyed. We should note that this was all taking place today here. And the way that this lawyer put it to me was that this is, number one, a violation of the Federal Records Act, but number two, that there is a standard operating procedure when it comes to processing records. And unless all of these records were digitized or there was a clarity that, for example, records older than 10 years old that have been appropriately deemed by necessary officials as no longer having to be archived, may be terminated, those can then be ultimately destroyed. But this email is very explicit to these individuals who received it. Quote, shred as many documents first and reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break. They were directed to go and clear out these classified safes and personnel documents from what used to be USAID headquarters. And Marco Rubio, the State Department that is now overseeing USAID, they just earlier this week said that 83% of the contracts that USAID oversaw have been eliminated. And the way the USAID official suggested to me is that if they're truly trying to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, many of these documents would have records as to exactly where payments have gone and how contracts have ultimately been executed across the world. And so if you are shredding and burning these documents, you are effectively removing a paper trail that could be paramount to actually understanding how USAID has executed and used its capacities overseas. And so much of that could be understood by these archived documents that were clearly been ordered today to be burned and destroyed.
Give us a rundown of what we've seen today, because, 30 minutes ago, the Dow was down quite a bit, and now it does look to be rebounding.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster ride here on Wall Street, which was an extension of the roller coaster that we had yesterday with that slide down. Again, the S&P 500 falling 1.7% just yesterday. But today, even though it looked like at certain points of time in the day that it was going to be another ugly day, we've actually just recovered that. And the S&P 500 just for a hot second actually was in the green. The NASDAQ, that kind of tech-heavy sector, had been oscillating above and below where it closed the day yesterday, looking like a Christmas tree, green and then red and then green and then red. So there's kind of been this back and forth in trading on Wall Street. But I've been talking to investors here at the New York Stock Exchange all day, and a number of them were saying that they're not necessarily sure that the worst of the turmoil, the worst of the volatility is really past us, because that tariff conversation is still happening. And I do think that that timely news just a few minutes ago, that Doug Ford having that conversation with the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and that resulting in a backing off from the Ontario side of things of levying that 25% surcharge on electricity to the 3 states of Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, that has coincided with some of the bounce back that we've seen in the stock market, again, as the S&P 500 does basically, float around at the level that it ended the day yesterday. That is certainly perhaps welcome news for investors that are just hoping maybe there's at least a conversation happening between these major policymakers to try to talk down and bring the temperature of these tariff talks down a little bit. But we'll have to see whether or not it results in any other action, because we have those retaliatory, or rather reciprocal tariffs that will be coming up April 2nd, not long from now.
What about the prospect for a recession, looking at what both Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase are predicting toward the end of this year.
Yeah, and again, I want to point out that the numbers that we have right now on how this economy looks does not point to a recession at the moment. But yes, when we talk about the predictions for whether or not a recession could be coming down the pike, yeah, look at those stats ahead of you. JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, these Wall Street banks that watch the economy so closely, raising their odds of a recession happening. That is certainly something that's underscored by the Wall Street action. In a recession, if there's a substantial contraction in economic activity, that is bad for companies that want to return to their shareholders. There's not enough net income for them to return in the form of dividends or buybacks. I mean, without getting into the advanced finance, there's also the Main Street implications of the American consumer accounts for about 70% of economic activity in this country. So if they stop spending, that would make the U.S. economy contract as well. And we've already heard concerns from the likes of Delta Airlines, American Airlines pulling back their forecasts for how much people could be spending on travel in this current quarter. And you also have Kohl's on the retail side of things guiding lower on their outlook as well. So again, these are companies that are worried that the C-suite concerns will spill over to Main Street as well, Katie.
Vaughn, what is the White House saying about this conversation between Doug Ford and Howard Lutnick?
Nothing that I'm seeing yet. I think it's notable that Caroline Leavitt's briefing wrapped up, and then this statement came out from Premier Doug Ford of Ontario just here in the last few minutes. But I'm waiting to see from Howard Lutnick in the Commerce Department in the White House more official comments, because it's not clear the extent to which the U.S. is seeking to roll back any tariffs. Of course, President Trump, the threat this morning and the indication that he would double the tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada from 25% to 50% was a threat, but the paperwork had not been formally signed, and that was intended to go into place tomorrow. And that's when Premier Doug Ford said that he would place 25% cost on electricity going to the United States, Michigan, Minnesota, New Yorkers who part of their energy systems are reliant on that electricity from Canada. And so clearly there is a stand down, at least specifically on increasing from the Canadian side that 25% cost onto electricity coming to the United States. But all of this is part of the idea in this apparent statement that it was released by Ford and Lutnick that the USMCA trade agreement would be renegotiated. Of course, next summer is the summer of 2026 specifically is when that reauthorization period for negotiations of the USMCA was going to be coming up anyways. Again, what is the actual objective and end game goal result of this entire trade war standoff between the United States and Canada? It's not clear, and I don't think this initial statement in the last few minutes makes it any more definitive exactly what the U.S. is looking for.
All right, with all this back and forth, Lorianne, I'm curious how this affects supply chains. Is the supply chain able to follow, there's a tariff, there's not a tariff, there's a surcharge, there's not a surcharge?
It's going to be twofold. So the immediate aspect are the shippers getting in. To kind of give you a sense, when the Chinese tariffs hit, one of the shoemakers that I interviewed, they told me they got hit with a $75,000 extra tariff that day that they were not planning for. So when you're looking at companies, Katie, that are bringing product in, they're going to be slapped immediately with the additional tariff. And you're going to be talking about a very big price tag here. Now, when you look at the why, I've got a really great chart that I want to show you in terms of the why. Trump does have a reason for deploying these tariffs on China. In 2001, Biden rescinded the 232 tariff on steel and aluminum. Look at that chart. Once Biden was elected and he took off those tariffs, look at the amount of aluminum that has come in from both Canada as well as Australia. Canada, of course, as you can see, is the larger of the two. Now, this actually impacted U.S. jobs. We had smelters that actually closed over the last year because of these of the dumping, if you will, of the aluminum tariffs. So that's the reason why you have a lot of U.S. Aluminum and steel makers rejoicing in this. But it's that fine line, because then you've got the shippers that, they may be making hammers or other tools, if you will, with those products. They're going to get slapped with their tariff, and then they're going to have to go back to the retailer to say, hey, listen, can we share some of this pain? And based on my discussions with a lot of companies, those retailers are telling them no. So they have to eat it.
So there's always a knock-on effect, but it is an important point to make about how there are some U.S. industries who believe the tariffs are a good thing. And I'm so happy you brought that graphic showing just how much more aluminum and steel we imported after Joe Biden became president 5 years ago. Ashley Parker, that gets us to the long view of this. And I've been wondering this for a few days. I believe you're wondering it as well. Usually Donald Trump reacts pretty swiftly to headlines, to the markets especially. But he's not doing so now. And just to remind everybody, let me play what Donald Trump has said about the markets. And you can see how it's changed from when he was president to the first time to today. Excuse me. Listen.
Every day for the last long period of days, the stock market, meaning companies, have been hitting new highs. The stock market reached yet another all-time, in history, all-time high today. Boosting the retirement savings, hopefully, of everybody in this room. You know, the markets have gone through the roof since November 9th. That's the day after I won the election.
The economy has just been reported to be doing very badly. The stock market's way down.
We have a very, very sick country right now. You saw the other day with the stock market crashing. That was just the beginning. Nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market. You can't really watch the stock market. If you look at China, they have a 100-year perspective. We have a quarter. We go by quarters.
So that's interesting right there. That's a different Donald Trump. Don't look at the short term, look at the long term. Is that what's going on here? Is he really trying to rebalance things? And is he willing to take the pain that that's going to cause in the short term?
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating to watch. And if you'll indulge me for a second, you and I and Vaughn, actually, we all first met back in 2015 when no one thought that Donald Trump was going to win the presidency. And when he did, I was finishing up at the New York Times. I was just getting ready to leave to go to the Washington Post. And I had to field all of these frantic questions from reporters and editors there who had never expected him to become president, trying to understand who is this man and how does he behave? Is he playing three-dimensional chess? And having reported on him and observed him, and this was true then and it's been true up till right about now, the answer I gave, which is long held true, is Donald Trump is a businessman who is trying to win the minute, the hour, the day, the week. He is trying to win over the person directly in front of him. He is not playing 3D chess. So watching, and he's also someone who, from those earlier clips you showed, he treats the stock market numbers the way he treats polls. When it's up, that is good for him. If he's in power, it is bad if they are down for whoever is in power, him. And so to see him now taking this perspective, which we've seen for a couple of days now, of likening it to China, saying, I'm in it for the long game, potentially a centuries-long appeal. This is something we've seen from other presidents, like President Obama trying to push through the Affordable Care Act, but never really from Trump in a sustained way. And so I am so curious to see how long he can stomach that short-term pain for what he claims will be long-term gain, especially when the stock market he views as a reflection on himself, the way polls are.
He said that he believes that multinational corporations are bad. Globalists are bad. They're stealing from us. Is that the view of the people that he's put around him as well? I mean, could this be the goal of the administration, of the economic folks that are inside this administration, to truly to bring back manufacturing home, to rehome multinational corporations, to make this a place that is less dependent on global forces?
Well, put it this way, you certainly have a more homogenous group of advisors around him this time than you did the first time he was president, right? Where you had Gary Cohn stealing pieces of paper off his desk to try to prevent, what he viewed as cataclysmic trade decisions. You have Peter Navarro in there, who definitely shares this view. But again, what's interesting is while there are more people who have that view, this idea that the United States is getting a bad deal, that we're getting taken advantage of, and that one of the ways you stop it is through trade and through tariffs. In terms of the comments and the recognition of the current reality, It's actually Trump who is far more willing to acknowledge there might be, as he would put it, a little bit of a disturbance. This might be a little bit of a transition period. And not everyone in his administration is saying the same thing. And that's yet another thing that's causing these markets to fluctuate wildly, because the markets like certainty. And when Trump says one thing and his commerce secretary says another thing, that's confusion.
So Elon Musk told Larry Kudlow yesterday that his work in the government has caused him great difficulty in running his businesses. Also in that interview, he referred to the federal spending programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid as the areas that need to be eliminated. Take a look.
I mean, the way it's important in entitlement spending, which is which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. That's like the big one to eliminate, because that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year. That is also a mechanism by which the Democrats attract and retain illegal immigrants by essentially paying them to come here, and then turning them into voters.
Yes.
So this is why the Democrats are so upset about the situation, because they're losing. If we turn off this gigantic money magnet for illegal immigrants, then they will leave, and they will lose voters. Why are the 20 million people who are definitely dead marked as alive in the Social Security database? Why were hundreds of millions of dollars of Small Business Administration loans were given out to people aged 11 and under, according to the Social Security? I mean, like, these must be some very enterprising 8-year-olds,
And some pretty strong 150-year-olds.
Yes, exactly. As the president said, we have an enormous number of people marked as alive who are 160. He didn't know the country was that healthy.
I love Larry. I've known Larry for a long time, and if it offends you that I like Larry Kudlow, despite his politics, I'm sorry, I can't help you. But Larry just sat there, and he let Elon Musk lie. And then Larry's interview was replayed on another show, and Larry replays it, and the response to that is, wow.
Really select sections.
When they know that it's a lie. So a report from the Social Security Administration in 2023 showed that 18.9 million people were listed as 100 years or older, but not dead in the database. And the reason why is because it's automated, and some of their dates of death didn't show up. But almost none received any payments. Additionally, 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump's own acting Social Security commissioner, said there's no epidemic of people listed as 150 years or older who are collecting benefits. In fact, get this. Right now, according to the 2020 Census Bureau, there are about 80,000 Americans alive over the age of 100 out of 330 million. Sounds about right. 80,000 people. 80,000. Of those 80,000, only 44,000 are getting Social Security checks. So they're sitting there going 20 million, 30 million, over it. They know it's a lie. They know that the automated system just hasn't put the date of death on some people there. They know that not only are they not paying more people money, but they know that only about 50% of Americans who are over the age of 100 are even receiving Social Security checks. And yet, we see Elon Musk lie about it. We see Larry sit there and let him lie about it. We see Larry go on another show talking about it. We see the host of that show not correcting Larry. And it goes on and on and on.
And he said he wanted to really kind of normalize or give people an understanding of what these guys are doing in there and not, not feel like it's so bad.
Not feel like it's so bad. And so Larry wanted to do that and said he just lets him lie. But Mike Barnicle, that's not even the headline out of this.
Well, Joe.
Who was it? Was it Willie Sutton that said you rob banks because that's where the money is? Was it Willie Sutton? Because that's what Elon Musk just said. Elon Musk didn't say we're going after waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare. What he said was we got to get rid of Social Security and Medicare. There's about $80 billion right there every year. So just so people don't go, oh, but he was talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. Do you know how much money was spent on Medicare last year? About $80 billion. He's talking about the whole kit and caboodle, whatever that means. He's talking about all of it. He said, that's what we have to eliminate. The 80. Could we just play that part again? Because I know people in the White House are saying, oh, he's talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. No. He says we have to eliminate Social Security and Medicare.
The fraudulent programs.
And then he said they're fraudulent programs and they're used to lure brown people into the United States.
But don't trust us.
Basically. So they'll vote for Democrats. So it's not waste, fraud, and abuse. Here, he's talking about eliminating the entire program because he gives the game away by talking about the entire budget for Medicare, which is like $70-80 billion. Play it again,
Trust
Sam.
him.
I mean, the waste report in entitlement spending, which is which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. That's like the big one to eliminate, because that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $600-700 billion a year. That is also a mechanism by which the Democrats attract and retain illegal immigrants by essentially paying them to come here and then turning them into voters.
Yes.
So this is why the Democrats are so upset about.
So that's why the Democrats that's why they support Medicare. Is that why they support Medicare? Because I don't see Republicans voting against Medicare. Again, the exact quote: the entitlement programs, those are the big ones to eliminate. And again, Mike, he just gave the entire budget of Medicare per year that he wanted to eliminate.
Joe, as you reported a few moments ago, there are 80,000 Americans over the age of 100. Listening to Elon Musk makes me feel as if I am one of them. I mean, it's incredible listening to him. Let's stipulate that Elon Musk is a genius, certified genius.
Yes, he is.
Let's also stipulate that he has the arrogance of an intellect that is so far removed from reality that he has the high likelihood, we've just seen it proven, of going on national television and stating basically Medicare and Social Security are Ponzi schemes that are ridiculous. They are the life essence of many Americans' lives. Elon Musk does not know that. He'll never realize it. But it is a ticket. Is it a ticket, I think, Chris Matthews, to getting back the House of Representatives for the Democrats if they continue down this path?
Surely it is, because it was back in 1982 with Ronald Reagan, 26-seat pickup because of the Social Security screw up by the Republicans when they're talking about making it voluntary. You know, I have to tell you, when I watched Elon Musk and I watched Trump with this this whole plan of his to start a trade war. I go back to Smoot-Hawley in 1930. We lost like $7 billion in trade and exports because of what the other countries did back to us, and they're all doing it right now. This is all in the playbook. You start a trade war, you got a trade war. The other countries cut off all their imports, and we get stuck with our agricultural products overloaded in this country. We can't sell them to anybody. It's unbelievable. I look at Trump and I keep thinking, Trump, the Trump Casino in Atlantic City. That used to be the big casino. You drove right into Atlantic City, and there was that big casino. It's gone. The Trump University, it's gone. Trump shuttle, we haven't taken that lately, have we? That's gone. This idea that things will turn out is right out of Chauncey Gardner in Being There. He's telling the president, Jack Warren, don't worry, we're gonna plant in the spring and we're going to sow in the fall and everything's going to be great. It isn't going to be great. This is a trend line. This is an economic trend line in the market. And it's going to be worse in the next couple of days and worse after that because he has started a trade war that we're going to lose. And it's unbelievable that there's people believe in it. And Kudlow, when he sat there and made those weird sounds every time Musk says, oh, that's good. Why didn't they just say you're lying? You're lying because people come in this country illegally. Well, they do come in illegally, and they don't get any Social Security benefits. They pay in all the time because they have to use some phony name, but they don't get any benefits from it. And by the way, they don't vote. Got it? Somebody got in trouble for once lying. You lie, about the president, about Obama speaking. They don't vote. You got it, buddy? They don't vote. Maybe you're voting. Maybe you're one of the $5 million guys that bought a ticket here. But they don't vote. The poor people coming here looking for jobs. They don't vote, buddy. And why didn't Kudlow say that? Just like the Democrats on Tuesday night. Why didn't the Democrats rise up and say, we are not paying Social Security to 160-year-olds because there aren't any 160-year-olds. They don't exist, unfortunately. We don't exist at 160. It's all wrong. The lies and the history, the ignorance of this crowd is unbelievable. And there are people out there, the MAGA people, don't know any better. They go, and that's good. And the strange reaction to everything is fine is these grunts they have. And the Democrats are absolutely anemic. I'm sorry, anemic.
Any chance you went by a Tesla dealership this weekend? If so, you might have noticed something. There is a growing protest movement around the country. Demonstrators in all 50 states full of energy, pointed signs, trying to hit billionaire unelected co-president Elon Musk where it hurts. The value of his car company's stock. Protest organizers and lots of just, everyday individuals have also been designing and printing out flyers to put on parked Tesla cars saying things like, sorry about your swastika, and the more direct, please sell your car. It seems like a movement that's definitely gaining momentum. There's online websites that are organizing these protests. They seem to be growing weekend to weekend. On Monday, after a solid weekend of protests, which was like the third or fourth in a row, the markets opened and Tesla's stock tanked. Down more than 15% on the day, down more than 50% from its peak a few weeks after the election. Now, all other things being equal, Tesla stock was due for a correction. Hugely, hugely overvalued. And that was before its post-election day spike when people snapped up Tesla stock because, well, Elon Musk was going to be running policy in the White House. And of course, that's going to be good for Tesla. Now the stock has come back down to earth. And it's really clearly starting to get under Elon Musk's skin. On Saturday, he claimed without evidence on X that an investigation of some kind had revealed that wealthy philanthropists, including George Soros, were funding the groups behind Tesla protests. And so today, Donald Trump offered Musk a government bailout of sorts.
Mr. President, do you think you buying a Tesla will boost Tesla sales and boost their stock?
It does. Look.
Was that your goal?
I care about one thing. When somebody's a great patriot, they shouldn't be hurt. He's a great patriot.
Yeah, Donald Trump bought a car from his buddy, or at least he said he did. Who knows, right? Right off the makeshift Tesla lot they set up in front of the White House. What does this have to do with the American people and their interest, public interest? Couldn't tell you. When Trump was asked what to do about the people targeting Tesla cars and dealerships, here's what happened.
Some say they should be labeled domestic terrorists.
I will do that. I'll do it. I'm going to stop them. We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company.
You're either with the Tesla or you're with the terrorists. That's one way to try to stabilize an oligarch's business empire. The thing to understand is just how actually precarious the entire Tesla empire is. Listen to this. One way to measure a stock's value is to compare its price to how much money the company actually earns. The higher the price to earnings ratio, the more expensive, unrealistic a stock's price would seem to be. So, for instance, car makers like VW and GM have a price to earnings ratio of around 4. But according to recent data, Tesla's PE ratio is currently about 87. More than 20 times higher than GM's price to earnings ratio. You see the rest of the cars there. Tesla is still one of the most overvalued stocks on the whole market in terms of price to earnings. And it's because many people think Elon Musk is a unique genius. If he says they're going to win, they're going to win. But now investors seem to be not so sure. I mean, think about this. Tesla's customer base up until now has been the kinds of people that live in blue metro areas and are generally pretty liberal and generally hate Donald Trump. And now they hate Elon Musk. It's why his European car sales have just fallen off the map. And other nations and companies now have really good electric cars. There's tons of competition, lots of options for consumers who don't like this dude. And there's kind of a lesson here. It's why you don't usually see CEOs running around, publicly spewing insane right-wing conspiracy theories, insulting foreign ministers, and doing salutes that look for all the world like Sig Heils twice. It's not great business. Musk thinks he's somehow past all that. But the anger and the protests are growing. And gold-plated chainsaws and dark MAGA hats may not be the moves of a business genius after all.